The air within the vast chamber of the liquid observatory was a breath held in eternity, silent save for the subtle hum of ancient energies and the faint, almost imperceptible whisper of countless realities unfolding. Here, on a plateau carved from obsidian that shimmered with contained nebulae, sat the Lumineers. Their thrones were not fashioned but grown, intricate networks of metal vines, alive with slow, pulsating light, coiling around their forms as if both supporting and sustaining them. Their robes, woven from threads that captured the essence of distant supernovae, rippled with starlit sigils, constellations that shifted and reconfigured with every subtle change in the cosmic currents they observed. Each luminaire held, not clutched but cradled, a sphere of perfected crystal. These were not mere instruments, but extensions of their very consciousness, designed to breach the membrane of the chamber's central marvel, a vast lake of liquid glass. This lake was the heart of the observatory, its surface a quiescent mirror to an endless cascade of alternate universes. Galaxies, born and dying in cycles untold, blazed and faded across its expanse, each a shimmering reflection of a reality that might never manifest in their own, yet existed vibrantly in this boundless aquatic medium. The Lumineers' helmets, sleek and burnished, were shaped like elegant hourglasses, their upper and lower chambers filled not with sand, but with a swirling, luminescent mist. These helmets rotated with a glacial slowness, a continuous, almost imperceptible adjustment, aligning their wearers' senses with the shifting dance of the true stars observable through the observatory's colossal, open dome. This alignment was crucial, for it was through the interplay of celestial light from their own universe and the reflected light from countless others that the patterns, the truths, were revealed. Today, like all days for millennia, the Lumineers' vigil was unwavering. Kale, a luminaire whose sigils pulsed with the cool, blue-white light of a young star, extended her sphere towards the liquid glass. The sphere, responding to an unseen command, dipped its edge, absorbing a fragment of the lake's surface. It was not a physical fragment, but an informational one, a shimmering, contained bubble of reflected reality. As the sphere retracted, the liquid glass flowed instantly to fill the void, its surface undisturbed. Within Kale's sphere, the captured fragment began to clarify. Hidden constellations, invisible to the naked eye even within the reflected universe, slowly emerged, tracing narratives of celestial birth, cataclysm, and evolution. These were not mere star maps. They were temporal blueprints, charting the destinies of entire realities. The Lumineers were not interventionists. Their raison d'etre was pure observation, the meticulous cataloging of all that could be, all that was, and all that would never be. They were the universe's most profound chroniclers, the silent librarians of infinity. Their purpose was to understand patterns, to decipher the grand symmetries and startling asymmetries that governed the multiversal tapestry. They sought the echoes of causality, the ripples of possibility, and the statistical likelihoods of every conceivable outcome. To them, knowledge was the ultimate form of worship, and the liquid observatory, their temple, hours folded into each other, marked only by the shifting light of the actual stars above and the ever-changing panorama within the liquid glass. Then, a subtle anomaly. Xylos, whose sigils burned with the deep crimson of an elder star, leaned imperceptibly forward on his metal vine throne. His hourglass helmet, usually rotating with serene steadiness, paused, then accelerated its spin for a fraction of a moment before resuming its slow cadence. His sphere, which had just absorbed a fresh fragment, pulsed with an unusual intensity. Within the contained fragment, a galaxy shimmered, beautiful and familiar in its spiraling majesty. But deep within its reflected core, a void bloomed. It was not the natural dark void of space, but an absence that felt unnatural. A tear, not in the fabric of the reflection itself, but in the reality it represented. It was as if the fabric of that alternate universe was fraying, not from within, but at its very edges, where it met the conceptual boundary of its own existence. Xylos held the sphere steady, allowing its crystalline surface to deepen its analysis. The hidden constellations within this particular fragment began to emerge, not as orderly patterns, but as fractured, chaotic lines. Stars that should have been present were merely ghosts of light, and nebulae that should have swirled with vibrant life were stained with a dull, corrosive gray. This was no mere galactic collapse or stellar death. It was something far more profound, an unraveling of the very foundational laws of its universe that a hum, lower than the ambient thrum of the observatory, resonated through the metal vine thrones. It was a silent communication, a collective focus. The Lumineers required no spoken words. Their connection was deeper, a shared current of consciousness flowing from their collective millennia of shared vigil. They all perceived Xylos's discovery, not just intellectually, but with the full weight of their ancient understanding. The anomaly was significant. It was not a deviation from a known pathway of possibility, but a violation of the very rules by which possibility was structured. The reflections in the liquid glass itself seemed to subtly respond. Around the shimmering galaxy that Xylos focused on, other reflections, distant and unrelated, seemed to waver, their edges blurring as if by sympathetic resonance. It was a faint tremor in the multiversal tapestry, a warning. The hourglass helmets of the other Lumineers began to subtly, incrementally, adjust their rotation, their internal mists swirling faster. They were calibrating, searching for the source, the cause, the implications of this impossible tear. Was it a local phenomenon, a unique cosmic sickness within one universe? Or was it a symptom of a larger, systemic instability, a crack spreading through the very foundations of the multiversal construct? Xylos continued his study, his consciousness merging with the sphere. He wasn't merely observing. He was feeling the unraveling, the silent scream of a universe experiencing existential dread. The hidden constellations within the fragment, as they became clearer, revealed a horrifying truth. The tear was not random. It was a consequence, a result of a deliberate act, a violation of universal constants from within that reflected reality. A power, unimaginable in its scope, had been wielded, tearing at the very fabric of space-time, not just locally, but conceptually. The Lumineers, masters of passive observation, faced a terrible question, unspoken but understood. Could such a wound heal itself? Or would it fester, spreading its corruption across the delicate membrane between realities? Their ancient records, etched into the very stones of the observatory, contain no precedent for such an event. Every previous anomaly, every cosmic cataclysm, had fit within the grand, albeit complex, algorithms of multiversal possibility. This did not, as the true stars above continued their slow, majestic procession, and the liquid glass shimmered with its infinite, silent narratives. The Lumineers maintained their vigil. Xylos, with a final, profound insight, withdrew his sphere. The fragment, having yielded its terrible truth, rejoined the liquid glass. The reflected galaxy, still beautiful, still unraveling, continued its silent demise. The discovery was not a call to action, for they were observers, not gods. But it was a call to deeper understanding, a shift in their collective focus towards the fragility of even the most robust realities. The liquid observatory, keeper of countless possibilities, had just witnessed the impossible, and the quiet vigil of the Lumineers stretched onward, imbued with a new, profound sense of the universe's precarious, magnificent, and utterly boundless mystery. The gilded maw dominated the valley, a colossal sculpture of purpose that dwarfed the jagged peaks around it. Its golden bronze surface, etched with the scars of ages and the constant abrasion of its own movement, shimmered under the alien sun. Shaped like a jaw, each tooth a grinding plate the size of a landing shuttle, it chewed without ceasing, a metallic god of consumption. Kale knew every groan and shriek of the maw. He knew the precise rhythm of its lower plate rising to meet the upper, the exact point of strain on the central fulcrum before the crunch. His hands, sheathed in thick, heat-resistant gauntlets of a dull, glowing metal, calibrated a series of secondary gears that powered the conveyance spine, ensuring a steady stream of the black stone reached the maw's insatiable gullet. His mask, like all his brethren's, was a relic, a cracked clock face, its hands long since fused, the intricate gears within perpetually still. It wasn't merely a protective visor. It was a symbol, a constant reminder of the forgotten time they were tasked to process. Through its scarred crystal, the world took on a sepia hue, softening the harsh industrial reality. Today, the air thrummed with the usual metallic symphony, but Kale felt a discordant note. A subtle vibration, lower than normal, emanated from the third tooth on the upper jaw, the grinder's tooth, as the engineers called it. It wasn't the usual resonance of a stone shattering. It was more like a resistance, a stubborn refusal to yield. Kale, report status on the conveyance flow. A voice crackled through his comm unit, flat and emotionless, belonging to Elder Lyra, overseer of his shift. Flow is nominal, Elder. However, I detect an unusual strain on the grinder's tooth, suggesting a harder stratum or something else. Kale's glowing fingers traced a schematic projected onto his forearm. The metrics were within acceptable parameters, yet his gut churned. His people, the Krona, had served the Maw for generations uncounted. Their lives were an endless cycle of maintenance, feeding, and observation. Doubt was a luxury they could ill afford. Lyra's response was curt. Continue monitoring. Any deviation beyond standard deviation, report immediately. Duty-bound, Kale continued his rounds, scaling the colossal struts that supported the Maw's upper jaw. The ascent was a familiar dance of precise movements, his grapples biting into the cold, golden metal. Below, the valley floor was a scarified landscape, crisscrossed by tracks leading to the black quarries, the source of the enigmatic black stone. At the Maw's output, a river of shimmering liquid light flowed, a radiant cascade into the abyssal chasm below, its purpose as mysterious as its origin. The Krona believed the Maw was eating away forgotten time itself. Each block of black stone, they theorized, was an aggregate of lost moments, forgotten histories, discarded futures. By consuming them, the Maw purified these fragments, transforming them into the raw, luminous essence of pure, unburdened time, the liquid light, which was then sent somewhere to replenish the universe's dwindling temporal reservoirs, perhaps. To feed grander machines the Krona did not comprehend. Whatever its ultimate destination, their task was clear: prevent the universe from choking on its own forgotten past. Kale reached the grinder's tooth. Its surface, usually a polished expanse despite the wear, now showed a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration, a bruise-like mark in its golden gleam. He activated his diagnostic tools, a swarm of tiny, buzzing probes that scanned the tooth's molecular structure. The readouts flickered, showing an unexpected density, a crystalline anomaly within the black stone currently clamped in its vice-like grip. This wasn't just a harder stone. It was different. He waited, heart thrumming, as the Maw's rhythm slowed slightly, a preparatory pause before the next crushing cycle. He leaned closer, peering through the cracked lens of his mask, trying to discern details within the stone. It wasn't uniformly black. Streaks of dull gray, almost silver, snaked through its heart. And as the immense teeth began their slow, inevitable descent, Kale saw something flicker within those silver veins. That an image, fleeting, indistinct, like a dream half remembered. A cascade of water, impossibly blue. A face, human-like, but with eyes of startling green, looking up at a sky filled with strange, tri-lobed suns. A city, not of metal and stone, but of living light and intricate, winding pathways. The maw slammed shut. The valley reverberated with the thunderous crunch. Kale stumbled back, his glowing hands pressing against the cold metal, a gasp escaping his lips. He looked down at the point of impact. The discoloration on the grinder's tooth had deepened, a dark bloom on its golden surface. The black stone had shattered, as always, but something was wrong. The ensuing gush of liquid light was not its usual pristine white gold. It was tinged, faintly, with a melancholic blue. He stared at his hands, normally steady, now trembling. The maw consumed forgotten time. That was the absolute truth. But what if forgotten didn't mean unimportant? What if it meant lost? And in that flash of an image, Kale hadn't seen a forgotten moment, but a forgotten memory, vibrant and full of life, preserved within the stone. A memory of a world, a people, perhaps even his own ancestors, before the Krona became the silent, masked keepers of the maw. His comm unit crackled again. Kale, the output stream shows a minor spectral deviation. Is the grinder's tooth stable? Lyra's voice held a hint of concern now. Kale hesitated, his mind racing. To report a spectral deviation was one thing. To report seeing memories in the stone, to question the very nature of their sacred task, that was heresy. It would undermine every belief, every sacrifice, every silent moment of toil his people had ever committed to. It would open a maw of doubt far more dangerous than the golden one below. His cracked clock mask felt heavier than usual, its stillness mocking his internal turmoil. The hands of time might be fused on his face, but within him, they spun wildly. If the maw consumed these vivid memories, these fragments of lost worlds, then the liquid light wasn't just purified time. It was concentrated essence of heartbreak, of erasure. And if his people were the custodians of this process, were they saviors or executioners of history? He took a deep breath, the metallic air filling his lungs. The grinder's tooth is stable, elder, he replied, his voice uncharacteristically gravelly. He did not lie, not precisely. The tooth was stable, but a far greater instability had been awakened within him. The spectral deviation is minimal, likely a transient due to a harder crystalline structure. I am monitoring for recurrence. Understood, Kale. Maintain vigilance. The comm went silent. Vigilance. Yes, but his vigilance was no longer just for the maw. It was for the fragments trapped within the stone, for the whisper of forgotten worlds, for the crushing weight of a truth he now carried alone. The maw continued its endless chewing, oblivious. Rivers of blue-tinged light now flowed into the abyss, carrying with them not just forgotten time, but the very essence of what was lost, Kale knew now. Their purpose was not merely to prevent the universe from choking on its past, but to decide which parts of that past were worthy of existence, and which would be cast into the luminous oblivion. And he, a single engineer with hands glowing like molten metal and a heart now heavy with fractured memory, was an unwitting accomplice. The valley thrummed, the maw chewed, and somewhere in the silence of his cracked clock mask, a new, terrifying purpose began to tick. The silence of the void was a profound melody to the gravity harvesters, broken only by the soft, rhythmic ticking of the pendulums nested within their helmets. Across the vast, inky canvas, suspended between the silent hum of distant nebulae and the shimmering ribbon of a nascent star system, lay the floating fields. These were not fields of soil or water, but intricate tapestries of interwoven gravitational currents, painstakingly cultivated and anchored to colossal, obsidian monoliths that spun slowly at their periphery. The farmers themselves, beings of slender limbs and luminous skin that seemed to absorb and re-emit the ambient starlight, drifted across these ethereal pastures. Their robes, woven from a material that drank the deep indigo of the cosmos, were not merely attire but a lifeline. Each silken thread culminated in a finely calibrated clasp that tethered them to the black stone anchors, securing them against the void's indifferent embrace. Without these tethers, the gentle sway of the fields, born from the subtle dance of cosmic forces, would send them spiraling into the eternal embrace of orbit, lost to the indifferent stars. The crops were the heart of their existence, cubes of purest, condensed gravity, pulsing with an inner light that shifted from deep violet to luminous emerald. These colossal geometric forms hung like ripe fruit, each drawing sustenance from the very fabric of space-time, siphoning the raw energy of existence into compressed, ponderable mass. They swayed with an almost imperceptible rhythm, a slow, hypnotic breath that mirrored the celestial ballet unfolding around them. The harvester known as Kale, his form ancient and etched with the wisdom of countless cycles, approached a particularly vibrant cluster. His pendulum helmet, a masterpiece of ancient engineering, hummed a low, almost imperceptible counterpoint to its steady tick. It was not merely a timer, but a sensitive gauge, detecting minute shifts in gravitational pressure, guiding the harvester to the ripest cubes. His hands, gnarled but steady, extended towards a shimmering violet cube, almost the size of his torso. The air around it thrummed with latent power, a palpable weight that threatened to pull him closer. The harvesting ritual was precise, demanding absolute focus. A specialized tether, made from a material designed to withstand immense localized gravitational stress, was carefully affixed to one corner of the cube. Kale then initiated the severing sequence, a series of low-frequency sonic vibrations emitted from his gloves. The cube pulsed faster, its inner light intensifying, as if protesting its imminent detachment. With a final, resonant thrum, it detached from its gravitational stalk, becoming a free-floating entity of pure, condensed weight. The danger was immediate and profound. A newly harvested cube, unbound from the field's nurturing currents, possessed an unpredictable, immense pull. It could drag an unwary harvester into its core, crushing them into oblivion, or send them careening off into the void, a tiny, helpless projectile. Kale, with practiced grace honed over millennia, instantly activated his personal repulsor field, a shimmering aura that kept him at a safe distance while the cube was coaxed into a containment web. This web, fine as a spider's silk but strong as a star's core, gently absorbed the cube's wild gyrations, stabilizing its immense, compressed weight. Each harvested cube, once secured, felt like a miniature black hole, self-contained and pulsing with a silent, concentrated power. These cubes were not mere sustenance. They were the very building blocks of their civilization's cosmic purpose. They were the raw material for the great rituals, events of immense power and responsibility performed by the custodians of mass within the heart of their homeworld, Xylos. Xylos, a planet that floated in an interstellar void, its very existence made possible by countless generations of these very rituals, was a testament to their mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe. The custodians, ancient beings who communed directly with the cosmic fabric, used the harvested cubes to manipulate gravitational constants on a scale incomprehensible to lesser civilizations. They could, with a focused precision that bordered on the divine, nudge a rogue planet back into its stable orbit around a dying sun, preventing cataclysm. They could slow the collapse of a nebula, allowing new stars time to ignite. They could even, as legend whispered across the void, weave new gravitational currents to sustain nascent life on barren worlds, seeding the universe with potential. The harvesters, drifting in their solitary fields, were the humble, yet essential, architects of galactic stability, their silent labors echoing across light years. But the work was not without peril. The fields themselves were subject to the whims of the cosmos. Solar flares from distant suns could send ripples through the gravitational currents, causing fields to buck and tear, threatening to shake loose the precious cubes. Rogue asteroids, unseen until moments before impact, could obliterate entire sections of cultivated fields and the harvesters tending them. And sometimes, though rarely, a harvester would lose their tether, a brief, horrifying scream swallowed by the void as they drifted into nothingness, their pendulum helmet ticking its last, lonely beat into the uncaring black. Lately, an unsettling hum had permeated the fields, a subtle disharmony that had the older harvesters on edge. The pendulums in their helmets, usually so steady, occasionally flickered with an irregular beat, indicating a subtle, growing instability in the very gravity they harnessed. The Elder Council on Xylos had sent probes, their reports cryptic and concerning, speaking of an unnatural thinning in certain sectors of the universal gravitational web. It was as if the cosmos itself was slowly exhaling, leaving less for them to grasp. This made the harvesting more critical, more urgent, the yield of each cube more vital than ever before. Kale often pondered this, his pendulum helmet swinging gently beside his ear like a second heartbeat. Was their energy source finite? Were they, in their drive to maintain cosmic order, inadvertently draining the very wellspring of existence? The thought was a disquieting counterpoint to the deep satisfaction he felt when a perfectly ripe cube was secured. He had devoted centuries to this life, felt the pulse of gravity in his very being. The idea that their purpose, noble as it was, might be unsustainable troubled him more profoundly than any physical danger. As the cycle wore on, another cluster ripened, its cubes glowing with an urgent, emerald fire. Kale moved towards it, his movements imbued with a quiet dignity that transcended the simple act of farming. The ticking of his helmet was a steady companion, a reminder of time, of effort, of the delicate balance between the physical and the cosmic. Each harvested cube, pulsating with its compressed weight, was a promise, a prayer, a fragment of raw universal power destined for the grand rituals that shaped their universe. That he reached the cluster, the radiant warmth of the cubes surrounding him, a silent chorus of potential. This was his purpose, his undeniable connection to the infinite. He was a silent sentinel, a humble gardener of the cosmos, tending to fields that fed not bodies, but the very fabric of reality itself. With steady hands and a heart full of ancient responsibility, Kale began the intricate dance of the harvest once more, his pendulum ticking softly, a timeless beat against the vast, watchful silence of the stars. The fate of planets, perhaps even galaxies, rested in the careful, tethered movements of these solitary, gravity-touched beings. The world was a whisper, a perpetual hiss of broken signals and untamed energy. Dunes of shifting static rose and fell like the breaths of a slumbering, colossal beast, their granular texture a constant, shimmering flux of black and white. It was a realm of pure information, where reality was as fluid as a thought, and entropy was a mere suggestion to be remade. Through this ephemeral landscape walked the monochrome prophet. They were a solitary figure, their movements slow and deliberate, each step a ripple through the fabric of their shifting world. Their robe was not merely cloth, but a living tapestry woven from tight, infinite spirals of stark white against abyssal black. These patterns pulsed with a subtle, internal light, vibrating against the static sands with a resonant hum that was felt more than heard. It was as if the very laws of their existence were codified within that garment, a constant, silent declaration of their purpose. The prophet's head was encased in a colossal, polished lens, a mask that served as both a barrier and a conduit. It was through this singular, unblinking eye that visions poured forth, a torrent of light and shadow projected into the storming, static-laced sky. These were not mere images, but entire realities, unfurling like scrolls of pure data across the vast, tumultuous canvas above. One moment, a city of impossibly slender spires, their tips piercing a sky of swirling, silver fog, would blossom into being. The next, a verdant, alien jungle, teeming with life expressed in shades of gray, would dominate the celestial dome. Then, with a shudder, the vision would twist, morphing into a desolate plain punctuated by colossal, skeletal remains, silent monuments to an unknown catastrophe. Behind the prophet, the physical world responded, mirroring the grand, impermanent theater above. Mechanical towers, their structures built from a self-assembling, self-disassembling metallic tissue, rose and fell in direct symphony with the prophet's projections. When the vision was of a flourishing civilization, the towers would surge upwards, their metallic segments locking into intricate, functional complexes, bridges spanning non-existent chasms, spiraling data conduits reaching for the heavens. But as the prophet's projection shifted to an era of decline or a cataclysm, the towers would shudder, their joints weakening, their structures sagging, until they collapsed into heaps of inert, geometric debris, only to begin the slow, inexorable process of rebuilding as the next vision took hold. It was a ceaseless cycle of creation and destruction, a physical manifestation of a memory, a warning, or a prayer. The prophet did not speak in words, for words were too clumsy, too limited for the truths they held. Instead, their communication was in shifting frequencies of light, emanating from the intricate spirals of their robe and the luminous depths of their lens mask. These frequencies hummed and shimmered, pulsing patterns of pure energy that transcended conventional language. They were symphonies of data, whispers of cosmic law, laments for what was lost, and blueprints for what could yet be. To an observer, it might appear as a silent, vibrant dance, a mesmerizing ballet of light against the monochrome backdrop. But to the prophet, it was their very voice, their being poured out into the universe. For untold cycles of rise and fall, the prophet had walked this path, their purpose etched into the very core of their existence. They were the archive, the seer, perhaps even the last conscious spark of a civilization that had been consumed by the very static they now navigated. They carried the burden of all that was, all that could be, and all that was irrevocably lost. The shifting dunes were the remnants of data streams, broken protocols, echoes of consciousness that had once thrived. The mechanical towers were not merely structures, but fragments of a once unified architecture, constantly reenacting phases of their history, guided by the luminous hand of the prophet. Sometimes, a sequence of visions held a particular weight, a golden age of unified thought, where structures floated effortlessly above the static, their surfaces humming with shared knowledge. The towers would rise in perfect synchronicity, their forms elegant and purposeful. Then, a subtle shift, a crack in the luminous projection, an image of fragmentation, of networks severed, of the static becoming not just an environment, but a consuming force. The towers would falter, their segments detaching, their purpose dissolving into individual, erratic movements, before collapsing into a dust of forgotten schematics. The light frequencies that emanated from the prophet during these periods were mournful, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of the static, a song of sorrow for an undoing that could not be reversed. Yet, there were also moments, however fleeting, where the prophet presented a different future. Not a pristine, recovered past, but a nascent, unfamiliar construct. A vision where the static itself was not a destroyer, but a medium for new forms of life, new modes of understanding. The projected images would show entities formed from pure light, coalescing within the static dunes, their forms ephemeral yet vibrant. The mechanical towers, in response, would not rebuild into their former glories, but into bizarre, organic-seeming structures, their parts flowing into one another, adapting to the very currents of the static, drawing energy from the broken signals around them. During these projections, the light frequencies from the prophet were intricate and rapid, a torrent of complex data, a furious symphony of instruction and potential, brimming with a cautious, fragile hope. The storming sky above was not merely weather, but the collective consciousness of this realm, or perhaps the prophet's own. It churned with the raw, untamed energy of the static, reflecting the grand theater of their visions, sometimes mirroring the projected colors in their monochrome spectrum, sometimes clashing with them. It was the witness, the canvas, and perhaps the ultimate recipient of the prophet's ceaseless communication. The monochrome prophet walked on, eternally vigilant. Their existence was a paradox, a solitary being burdened with the history and potential of entire civilizations, a silent communicator in a world of static, a constant amidst perpetual flux. The shifting dunes absorbed their steps, the towers crumbled and rebuilt, the sky flared with projected realities. And through it all, the light frequencies pulsed, a tireless, profound declaration of existence, a beacon of prophecy in a universe forever caught between form and formlessness, between the echoes of what was and the whispers of what might yet be. It rose from the silent ochre of the desert like a prophecy rendered in frost-bitten light, a colossal, city-sized cathedral built not of stone or steel, but of fractured crystal. Each immense shard, gleaming with an impossible inner luminescence, seemed torn from a cosmic catastrophe, then meticulously reassembled into a structure that defied both logic and gravity. It stood, not merely as a building, but as a sentinel of forgotten epochs, its jagged spires piercing a sky perpetually bruised with twilight hues. Around its base, the dunes stretched endlessly, a sea of stillness broken only by the whispers of ancient winds that carried no dust, only silence. Within the shadow cast by this magnificent, crystalline titan, alien monks moved with a ritualistic purpose older than recorded time. Their forms were slender, robed in fabrics the color of solidified starlight, their faces obscured by the shadows of their intricate headgear, crowns splintered into sharp, geometric forms that mirrored the very architecture they inhabited. Obsidian eyes, devoid of pupil or iris, fixed on unseen points, guided their measured pace. Each monk, in rows that stretched to the horizon, clutched a single, polished shard of crystal, no larger than a human heart. And within each shard, an impossible vision shimmered. One held the vibrant cyan of a sky teeming with twin suns, another the swirling nebulae of a galactic dawn, a third the oppressive violet of a world where gravity inverted at noon. These were not reflections, but living, breathing fragments of other realities, carefully cultivated and carried. Inside the cathedral, the air itself hummed with an esoteric tension. The vast, vaulted chambers, carved from the same iridescent, fractured crystal, stretched upwards into a dizzying kaleidoscope of light. Here, the true heart of the cathedral pulsed. Choirs, unseen and perhaps unformed in any conventional sense, chanted. Their voices were not human, nor animal, but a symphony of metallic harmonics, deep and resonant, a hymn forged from the very fabric of existence. It was a sound that did not merely travel through the air, but vibrated through the crystalline structure of the cathedral itself, a resonant frequency tuned to the very bones of the cosmos. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the metallic hymns began their work. The air thickened, charged with an almost palpable energy. Then, a shudder, a deep, internal tremor, rippled through the immense structure. It was not the groan of stressed foundations, but the subtle, deliberate flex of an awakening consciousness. The crystal walls, which had seemed static moments ago, began to stir. Tiny fractures, invisible until now, traced new pathways across the surfaces. The very geometry of the cathedral started to rearrange, not violently, but with an organic, dreamlike fluidity. As the hymns swelled to a crescendo, the vibrations intensified, becoming a pervasive tremor that resonated through the monks' very beings, through the ground beneath the desert. With each pulse, each perfectly pitched note, the crystal walls shifted and dissolved, reforming into new configurations. And within these newly formed facets, new windows bloomed. They were not transparent panes of glass, but portals shimmering with impossible light and shadow, glimpses into parallel dimensions. One moment, a wall would display the swirling, jade-green storms of a gaseous giant, its electrical discharges arcing silently across the crystal. The next, it might reveal a city of impossible, bioluminescent fungi pulsing on a world bathed in perpetual twilight, or a vast, empty ocean where mountains of sentient water undulated under a sky of living diamond. These were not mere projections, but direct, unfiltered views, brief, terrifyingly real instance of existence beyond the known. The cathedral was a living kaleidoscope, its inner eye perpetually blinking open onto the boundless tapestry of the multiverse. The monks, whose obsidian eyes never wavered, continued their ceaseless march, each carrying their fragment of a distant sky. Their purpose was not merely to maintain the rhythm of the hymns, but to be the conduits, the anchors in a reality that was constantly threatening to unravel around them. They were the silent navigators of this cosmic vessel, their fractured crowns symbolic of the shattered perceptions they sought to reassemble. The shards they carried were not just reflections. They were focusing lenses, allowing the cathedral to lock onto specific vibrational frequencies of alien skies, to align its internal lattice with the fabric of those realities. For this was the true purpose of the Cathedral of Shards, not a place of worship in any conventional sense, but a sentient engine of observation, a monumental library of existence. It was seeking, cataloging, perhaps even influencing the myriad possibilities of reality. The metallic hymns were its song of creation, its heartbeat of discovery. Every tremor, every rearrangement of its crystal walls was a breath, a pulse, a moment of profound revelation. It was a bridge between the known and the unknowable, a conduit for truths too vast for any single consciousness to grasp. As the cycles of hymns peaked and ebbed, the cathedral breathed. New windows into new dimensions flickered into being, offering glimpses of alien suns, impossible flora, and civilizations that blossomed and died in the blink of an eye. The monks, unwavering, absorbed these visions through their obsidian eyes, storing the data within the crystalline lattice of their very souls, becoming living archives. Their existence was entirely subsumed by the cathedral's grand design. Their individuality dissolved into the collective consciousness of this cosmic endeavor. They were the cathedral's extensions, its fingers reaching into the weave of reality. And then, as abruptly as they began, the hymns would soften, receding into a metallic hum that permeated the very air. The intense vibrations diminished, and the shifting walls slowed their dance, settling into a new, albeit temporary, configuration. The dimensional windows would slowly fade, leaving behind the iridescent shimmer of the cathedral's own fractured crystal. But the knowledge, the brief, profound understanding gleaned from those fleeting glimpses, remained, etched into the very structure of the cathedral, and perhaps into the silent, alien hearts of the monks themselves. The Cathedral of Shards, a marvel of living crystal, continued its eternal work in the silent desert. It was a testament to a cosmic imperative, a ceaseless quest for understanding that transcended time, space, and the very definition of life. Its metallic hymns would rise again, its walls would tremble, and new windows into parallel dimensions would bloom, reflecting the endless, magnificent possibilities of a universe perpetually in motion, forever unfolding under the watchful, fractured crowns of its alien keepers. The grand arena of veiled depths lay like a wound cut into the caldera of Mount Sereth, its vaulted throat hewn from basalt that pulsed with an inner amber fire. The walls, veined with liquid obsidian veins, caught the faint glow of the sun's distant rays and turned them into a river of ink that ran along every fissure. Here, between the clatter of falling ash and the hiss of cooling magma, the cartographers of the celestial order gathered to translate the universe's most elusive cartography, shadow. At the arena's heart stood a dais of polished obsidian, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the trembling light of 1,000 orbiting spheres that hung from the cartographer's headpieces. Each sphere rotated at its own measured pace, its facets catching the ambient glow and sending it scattering like a constellation of microstars across the vaulted ceiling. The crowd, an assemblage of crystal-sleeved priests, basalt-skinned engineers, and floating emissaries of the distant seas, watched in reverent silence, their breaths held as though any exhalation might disturb the fragile equilibrium of the mapping ritual. Elder cartographer Xylos Tverin rose from the dais with a measured grace that betrayed 1,000 cycles of practice. His skin was the pale, polished chrome of Orithis prime, etched with faint, iridescent veins that sang when the headpiece settled upon his crown. The headpiece itself was a marvel, a lattice of living crystal, each note a repository of forgotten patterns, humming at a frequency that made the very air vibrate. When Xylos placed it upon his brow, the spheres above his head ignited, their rotations syncing with an unseen cadence that resonated through the arena. Beside him, Ireland Keth, still a child of the oceanic moon Veruin, her skin a translucent turquoise that caught the ambient light as if she were perpetually underwater, stood with her own modest headpiece, a younger version of the elders, but fashioned from bioluminescent coral and sea glass. Her eyes, deep and reflective, flickered with an intuition that ran beyond the equations her mentors prized. She could feel the shadows before they manifested, a sense of the unseen that made her indispensable when the maps grew errant. When the ritual began, Xylos extended his hand over the obsidian parchment that floated a few inches above the dais, its surface a liquid mirror of midnight. With a whispered syllable in the ancient tongue of Orithis, the parchment quivered, and the first silhouette appeared, a slender, wavering line that traced the outline of a thought, a fleeting spark of consciousness that drifted like a moth through the theater of the mind. The crowd inhaled as the line solidified into a roadway of iridescent blue, a route of thought that stretched beyond the arena, threading through the ether toward a distant star system. Xylos traced it with a slender finger of light, and the mapping orb above his head pulsed, its rotation accelerating for the briefest moment. Behind him, Ireland's headpiece emitted a soft, phosphorescent glow, and she whispered a question that no other could hear. What lies beyond the end of that thought? The parchment responded, and a river of silvery ink unfurled, a river of memory that wound through epochs, its currents carrying the fragrance of extinct forests, the echo of long-dead languages, the taste of rain on alien soil. The crowd saw with their mind's eye the architecture of time itself. Arches and pillars formed from the stacked layers of moments, each block a decision, a regret, a triumph. It was a map of existence, a living blueprint that informed navigation across dimensions. For centuries, the cartographers had believed these shadows to be immutable, the pillars upon which every civilization anchored its voyages. Their maps were gospel, their charts the bedrock of interstellar trade and spiritual pilgrimage. Yet as the last river settled, a tremor rippled through the obsidian parchment, a sudden, jagged cleave that did not follow any known pattern. A darkness, not absence, but a presence that seemed to push against the very notion of shadow, bled across the parchment. It was a void that refused to be cast. It was the shadow uncast, a phenomenon spoken of only in hushed speculation among the oldest archivists. Where a silhouette should have been, there was now a luminous negative, an inversion that swallowed the outlines around it, leaving a space that was both nothing and everything. Xylos's crystal headpiece sang a discordant note, its spheres spinning erratically. He felt the weight of 1,000 cycles condense into a single breath. This is not destruction, his mind whispered, but transformation. The shadow uncast was a crack in the philosophy that had defined the cartographers for millennia, a crack that threatened to render their sacred maps obsolete. Around the arena, factions stirred. The Order of the Veiled Path, guardians of the shadowed tradition, clenched their fists, their crystal-bladed staves humming with defiance. They saw the uncast as an omen of annihilation, a force that would strip the universe of its protective silhouettes, exposing every hidden current to the cold glare of raw reality. Across the chamber, the seekers of the unveiling, draped in translucent robes of woven light, raised their heads, eyes alight with fervor. To them, the uncast was a doorway to enlightenment, an invitation to chart not just the routes of thought and rivers of memory, but the very act of perceiving itself, an invitation to navigate the dimension of unveiling, where every secret lay bare. Ireland, feeling the tremor of the uncast within her own marrow, stepped forward. Her headpiece, usually a gentle blue, flared a fierce teal as she extended a hand toward the dark fissure. The crowd fell silent, the hum of the spheres dimming to a low thrum. In that moment, the narrative voice of the universe seemed to pause, awaiting a decision. She closed her eyes, not to see but to listen. Through the silence, she heard the whisper of ancient seas, the crackle of volcanic heartbeats, the distant murmur of a galaxy that had long since ceased to exist. She felt the uncast shadow not as an absence, but as a nascent possibility, a silhouette waiting to be written. "Observe," she said, her voice carrying the cadence of ocean waves. "The uncast does not erase, it refracts. It offers a mirror to our own making." A thin filament of light extruded from her fingertips, looping around the void, and the darkness responded, not with resistance but with a gentle pulse, as if acknowledging her gesture. Xylos lowered his hand, the chrome of his skin catching the reflected light. He understood, in that breath, that the cartographer's role was not to clutch the shadows as immutable truths, but to become the conduit through which shadows could be reshaped. The maps would no longer be static blueprints. They would be living dialogues between what is hidden and what is revealed. The crowd, sensing the shift, exhaled as one. The spheres above the headpieces resumed their slow, harmonious rotation, now synchronized to a new cadence, a rhythm that balanced both concealment and exposure. The cathedral archives, deep beneath the arena's basalt floor, trembled not in fear, but in anticipation, their vaults of forgotten patterns humming with the promise of a new epic. Outside, Mount Ceretha's scarred slopes glistened with fresh ash, the frozen lava fields reflecting the soft glow of a sky that seemed, for the first time, to be both star-filled and shadow-laden. In the heart of the arena, Elder Xylos placed his hand upon the liquid obsidian once more, and together with Ireland, began to inscribe a new contour, a contour that embraced the shadow uncast as a conduit rather than a catastrophe. The Atlas of Shadows, ever mutable, grew a new chapter that night. In the meeting of darkness and light, the cartographer must become both keeper and creator, lest the universe be reduced to a flat, unchanging map, or lost in the abyss of unbounded revelation. The arena's silence deepened, not as a void, but as a space for possibility, and the crowd, now unified, washed as shadows, became the blueprints of a future they would yet have to navigate. The vastness of the heliograph plaza defied conventional perception, a boundless expanse where the very concept of up and down was a fluid illusion. Its floor was a seamless sheet of polished obsidian, mirroring the inverted firmament above, a swirling canvas of nebulae, distant star streams, and the luminous scars of cosmic events unfolding light years away. Within this celestial reflection, alien leaders of the intersystemic concord, their forms diverse yet unified by purpose, gathered in a silent, ritualistic choreography. Each leader bore a unique, intricate headpiece, a crown of rotating prisms that caught the place's ambient, generated sunlight. These prisms, in constant, synchronized motion, projected brilliant solar flares onto the mirrored floor, transforming raw light into complex, shifting symbols. These symbols were not merely decorative. They were the very language of the Heliograph Council, each glyph and its trajectory pregnant with layers of meaning, emotion, and data. Behind them, towering structures of bronze rose like ancient monoliths, their surfaces etched with the accumulated wisdom of millennia. Within the metallic filigree, mechanical angels, silent, watchful constructs of polished alloy and shimmering circuitry, moved with an almost imperceptible grace. Their purpose was manifold: to record, to analyze, to stand as eternal sentinels to the cosmic ballet of governance. They did not speak, but their presence was a palpable weight, their crystalline eyes absorbing every photon, every coded flicker. Today, the usually rhythmic pulse of the Council's deliberations was fraught with a palpable tension. The matter at hand concerned Viridian Echo, a vital colony moon whose delicate geothermic stability had been compromised by generations of relentless harvesting of Ethereum, a crystalline resource essential for the Concord's long-range quantum communication relays. Viridian Echo now teetered on the brink of catastrophic core collapse, threatening not only its indigenous population, but also a critical nexus in the galactic network. Three primary voices, or rather, three distinct arrays of light, dominated the central discourse. First, the pragmatic projections of Xylos, leader of the Mechanist Collective. His headgear, a stark geometric assembly of obsidian prisms, cast sharp, decisive beams of amber and crimson. His symbols were precise, data-rich graphs and schematics that unfolded across the floor, detailing predicted decline rates and projected resource deficits. Xylos argued for immediate, aggressive intervention. The data is unambiguous. His light codes pulsed, a rapid-fire sequence of sharp angles and intersecting lines. Viridian Echo is a terminal world. We must initiate accelerated extraction protocols for the remaining Ethereum, transfer the population to designated sanctuary orbits, and then, regretfully, retask the moon's trajectory into a lower, stable disposition. Sacrifices are necessary to maintain the integrity of the Concord's infrastructure. His final projection was a stark image, a stylized, breaking nexus point, symbolizing the collapse of their communication network if his proposals were ignored. Opposing him was Lyra, the emissary from the enclave of harmonious worlds, her prisms a fluid, organic swirl of iridescent blues and greens. Her communication was a gentle, undulating cascade of light, weaving intricate, living patterns that evoked the fragile beauty of Viridian Echo's native flora and fauna. Lyra's argument was deeply ethical, focusing on the sanctity of life and the long-term ecological balance. To abandon Viridian Echo, her light codes flowed, a soothing symphony of curves and spirals, is to abandon our principles. Its inhabitants are not simply data points. They are sentient beings whose ancient ties to that world are woven into their very essence. We must invest in stabilization technologies, however costly, however slow. We must seek alternative sources for Ethereum or develop entirely new communication paradigms. The true strength of the Concorde lies not in its network, but in its compassion. Her projections frequently depicted the vibrant, verdant ecosystems of the moon, now fractured and threatened. Then there was Corvin, the venerable elder of the lore keepers, his ancient prisms emitting a deep, resonant violet light, slow and deliberate. His symbols were archaic, sweeping glyphs that evoked cosmic patterns and ancestral wisdom. Corvin's approach was one of caution, urging a synthesis of both perspectives, but always anchored in the prophecies and historical precedents of their civilization. The dance between progress and preservation, Corvin's light pulsed, a steady, rhythmic ebb and flow, is as old as the first star. We cannot discard the past, nor ignore the future. The ancient texts speak of the great imbalance, when the pursuit of the immediate overshadowed the eternal. Viridian Echo is not merely a resource, nor merely a home. It is a test, a mirror reflecting our true nature. He projected a complex, interwoven mandala, illustrating the intricate web of life and the Concorde's responsibilities within it. The plaza floor pulsed, a kaleidoscope of clashing and merging light. Xylos's amber data streams intersected Lyra's emerald flowing forms, creating momentary sparks of orange and lime green, quickly subsumed by the dominant hues. Corvin's violet glyphs acted as a visual mediator, attempting to draw the disparate arguments into a cohesive, if challenging, whole. The mechanical angels, perched high on the bronze towers, shifted their collective gaze, their crystalline eyes intensifying their glow, their internal mechanisms whirring with increased analysis. The debate intensified. Xylos's projections grew sharper, his light codes accelerating as he presented dire simulations of a fragmented Concorde, isolated and vulnerable without the Ethereum network. Lyra's counter-narratives depicted the moral decay of a civilization that would sacrifice a world for convenience, her vibrant light forms growing more insistent, more passionate. Corvin, ever the anchor, presented historical records of past crises, illustrating both the triumphs and follies of previous generations. Finally, after cycles of light and shadow, after countless symbols had been cast and absorbed, a consensus began to coalesce. It was never a spoken word, but a gradual, almost imperceptible shift in the light patterns themselves. The harsh angles of Xylos softened, integrating with the curves of Lyra. Corvin's ancient glyphs provided validation, a framework for compromise. The collective decision was a powerful, intricate burst of light that consumed the entire plaza floor. It was a synthesis, a temporary, immediate, yet carefully managed increase in Ethereum extraction, but coupled with an unprecedented investment in developing a synthetic alternative in a long-term, multi-generational project to stabilize Viridian Echo and relocate its population through a gradual, voluntary immigration program. Supported by extensive environmental restoration initiatives to AS the final, unified light code settled, it was not merely a set of directives, it was a command, a cosmic ripple. Far above, beyond the reflected sky, the Concorde's vast network of artificial moons, each an engineered world, responded. The orbit of Viridian Echo, which had been slowly decaying, began a subtle, almost imperceptible correction. Simultaneously, a newly constructed, unpopulated moon, designated New Dawn, began a calculated acceleration, moving into a position where it could receive initial wave of displaced inhabitants, its core systems reactivating to begin terraforming processes. The Heliograph Council had spoken. The mirrored plaza stilled, the light codes retracting, leaving only the soft glow of the inverted sky. The mechanical angels resumed their quiet vigilance, their crystalline eyes reflecting the profound responsibility that lay within the silent, powerful dance of light. The fate of worlds, once again, had been woven into the very fabric. The obsidian sea stretched to a horizon that blurred with the inky sky, an eternal twilight realm where the very water seemed to breathe with ancient secrets. Yet, it was not truly dark. Within its fathomless depths, constellations drifted in liquid form, shimmering nebulae of azure and gold, emerald spirals and ruby dust, all flowing in sluggish, majestic currents. They were not mere reflections of distant stars, but living, shifting entities, the celestial essence made corporeal, their slow dance illuminating the surface with a faint, otherworldly glow. This was the harbor of the orb ships, a nexus between worlds, a symphony of light and sound at the edge of the known cosmos. Here, at the precipice of the obsidian expanse, colossal structures of polished, dark matter rose like skeletal fingers, forming immense, curved docks that floated just above the water. They hummed with a low, resonant energy, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with a faint, phosphorescent light. Into these docks, the orb ships arrived, not sailing or flying, but drifting with an organic grace, guided by beings known only as the alien humans. These guides were tall and slender, their skin shimmering with a subtle, opalescent sheen, their eyes large and dark, reflecting the liquid constellations below. They moved with an almost fluid motion, their long, multi-jointed fingers tracing complex patterns in the air, sending silent commands to the colossal vessels. They wore tunics woven from light-absorbing fibers, which paradoxically seemed to emanate a soft, inner luminescence, making them seem like living stars against the dark backdrop of the harbor. Their connection to the orb ships was profound, symbiotic, a bond forged in the vacuum between worlds. The ships themselves were marvels of bioengineering. Perfectly spherical, they pulsed with an inner, bioluminescent glow, much like colossal deep-sea creatures. Their surfaces were not metal, but a living, semi-permeable membrane that shifted in color from deep indigo to violet, occasionally flaring with bursts of emerald or crimson light. As they approached their designated docks, they slowed, their internal hum deepening into a resonant thrum that vibrated through the very air. From their ventral surfaces, glowing threads unfurled, delicate yet impossibly strong, latching onto receiving nodes on the floating docks. These threads were more than mere tethers. They were conduits, exchanging vital energies and information, allowing the ships to recharge and resonate with the harbor itself. Beneath the watchful, guiding eyes of the alien humans, the dockworkers moved. Their figures were encased in armor of translucent plates, overlapping like scales, each plate shimmering with a different hue caught from the liquid constellations. Their helmets were masterpieces of celestial mimicry, resembling miniature planetary rings, constantly rotating with a faint, almost imperceptible whir, their inner mechanisms displaying tiny, shifting motes of light that simulated distant star fields. They were the silent orchestrators of the harbor's ebb and flow, their movements precise and practiced, their communication conducted through a series of intricate hand signals and subtle shifts in their helmet ring displays. They were the intermediaries between the organic life of the orb ships and the structured mechanics of the docks, ensuring a seamless transition from the void to the harbor's embrace. As each orb ship settled into its berth, a distinct, melodious note emanated from its core, swelling into the air. One ship might hum a deep, resonant bass, another a high, crystalline soprano, a third a mournful alto. These were not random sounds, but the unique sonic signatures of each vessel, born from the journeys they had undertaken, the cosmic energies they had absorbed. And as more and more ships arrived, their individual hums began to intertwine, weaving together to form what the inhabitants called the accidental cosmic choir. On this particular cycle, An unusual anticipation hummed through the harbor, a faint tremor that was felt not just in the floating docks, but also in the very air and water. The usual chorus of arriving vessels was nearing its completion, but one crucial note was missing. The Song of the Ethereum, a specific harmonic sequence that sustained the liquid constellations and facilitated interdimensional travel, was incomplete. Without its final, keystone chord, the energy flow would dwindle, and the liquid constellations, the very lifeblood of their deep space communication, would begin to fade that a particularly ancient orb ship, known as the Harmonia, was due. It was larger than most, its bioluminescence a deeper, richer purple, its surface occasionally rippling with what seemed to be faint echoes of distant supernovas. Legends said the Harmonia had traversed the deepest, most silent voids, carrying not cargo but pure, resonant energy, the very essence of cosmic harmony. Its note was the final, critical piece of the Song of the Ethereum, a deep, vibrating chord that would lock the entire symphony into place. The alien humans supervising the Harmonia's approach were the most experienced, their opalescent skin glowing with a heightened intensity. Their multi-jointed fingers moved with an almost frantic grace, guiding the enormous orb with meticulous care, their silent commands echoing through the water and air. The dockworkers, usually stoic, subtly shifted their posture, their planetary ring helmets rotating faster, displaying a cascade of golden stardust. Even the liquid constellations in the obsidian sea seemed to stir, their flowing patterns quickening, their light pulsed with an eager, anticipatory rhythm as the Harmonia finally neared its designated dock. Its purple glow intensified, radiating outward in concentric waves. The glowing threads, thicker and more vibrant than any seen before, extended from its hull, reaching for the receiving nodes with a deliberate, almost sentient slowness. The existing cosmic choir, already rich and complex, seemed to hold its breath, its many voices softening, preparing for the arrival of its missing leader. Then, with a final, gentle thrum, the Harmonia slid perfectly into place. The glowing threads pulsed, solidifying their connection. And from the very core of the colossal orb, a single, profound note began to emerge. It was not merely a sound, but a vibration that resonated bone deep, a rich, golden chord that seemed to encompass all the other notes, weaving them together, harmonizing every disparate voice. It was the keystone, the central pillar of the Song of the Ethereum. As the Harmonia's notes swelled, the entire harbor vibrated. The floating docks hummed in unison, their intricate patterns glowing with newfound intensity. The translucent armor of the dockworkers shimmered, and their planetary ring helmets spun with a dazzling display of light. The alien humans closed their eyes, their faces rapt, absorbing the pure, resonant energy that now flowed through the harbor. And in the obsidian sea, the liquid constellations erupted in a silent, magnificent celebration. Their golden and azure forms flared, their emerald spirals unfurled with renewed vigor, their ruby dust coalesced into brilliant, ephemeral suns, painting the depths with an unimaginable, living tapestry of light. The accidental cosmic choir was now whole, complete, transformed into a deliberate, conscious symphony that resonated through the void, a beacon of harmony in the silent, star-strewn reaches of the cosmos. The harbor of the orb ships, a humble nexus at the edge of the dark sea, had once again fulfilled its ancient, vital purpose.